You're listening to the Daily Sales Tips podcast, and I'm your host, Scott Ingram. Today's tip is an excerpt from my All Things Sales Success webinar series conversation with Amy Volas that I just ported over to the Sales Success Stories podcast as a bonus episode yesterday. Check this out.
I think it's a seller's market because the market's on fire and there's lots of opportunity, right? But the maybe comes from, I can find a job, you can find a job, Scott. There's lots of jobs out there. But there's a difference between career moves and job moves. There's a difference between good business and bad business. And so when I think about the maybe, it's like, but the true cherry opportunities, like the stuff that the books are written from of like, that was amazing, those are very few and far between. Same thing with really, really good sellers that stand the test of time. Those are fewer and far between. The market is absolutely, especially over the last 4 to 6 weeks, it is absolutely skyrocketed. And the people that I talk to are getting hit up like you multiple times a day by a slew of people slinging their opportunity their way. So should you go or should you stay? It is a highly personal decision. And I find that the reason why I'm starting with this is I find that there are so many people, Scott, that look for social validation or want somebody to make the decision for them. Let me remind you, this is your career. And that's a really big deal. And to take a backseat approach to something that's so important because you got caught up on somebody's content or somebody that looks like you or looks like who you want to be, they don't sit where you sit every day. They're not in your shoes every day. They don't understand the nuances. So I think it's really important before you decide to stay or go is realize that first and foremost, the grass isn't always greener on the other side. And how do you know if it is or it isn't? And so there's a few things to do. One, I think it's time to get real and right with self. I'm a really big believer of there are 3 sides to every story. Their side, my side, and in the middle, there's the truth. And we both, right? Like, let's say it's you and I working together. We both hold responsibility in that story. And look, you come from enterprise sales, so do I. There is such a thing as a bad month. There is such a thing as a bad quarter, and you make it up 2 quarters later and you've blown out your whole year. I think it's important to ask yourself, am I just having a bad day? Am I having a bad quarter? Heck, am I having a bad year? And sometimes, and I think that people need to realize this, especially out of COVID. I know many people that are feeling heaviness now from dealing with what they went through last year, especially with the realization that everything isn't just turned right back on in 2021. And so that's heavy. Maybe you saw some bad things professionally. Maybe you dealt with some bad things personally. Maybe you've heard the horror stories of companies treating their employees poorly or companies having to make the tough decision to get rid of. That does not mean that somebody else's story is yours, though. So what's your story? What are you dealing with every day? I find that the stories that we tell ourselves aren't always rooted in reality. It's our perception of what's happening right now. And so how do you deal with that? So I'm a huge believer in 2 things. So we want to make this actionable always. 2 things. First thing, sounds like, why do I feel like we're playing charades? Like, so the first thing is how do you listen to yourself? Because we ultimately hold the answers to our own questions. Doesn't mean that you can't get different points of view or insight or knowledge. I'm a big believer that we should listen to ourselves. How do you do that though? I'm a huge fan of a journal and I've kept one for years and years and years. And the way that I do it, I have a system. I actually wrote about it. It's on my blog for anybody that would like to know exactly what I do.
Had to leave it on a bit of a tease there because there's so much more in the full conversation. And if you're considering any type of move, or if you're a sales leader looking to retain and grow your team, you've got to listen to this full conversation. As always, we'll have links for you at DailySales.Tips/858. Once you've checked that out, be sure to come back tomorrow for another great sales tip. Thanks for listening.